If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.
Told a lot of lies about achievement. They called you when they got you to believe it. Thumb and finger held to their foreheads in an L shape. Trapped in a capitalist hellscape. Let's fight back and have some talks about class and the massive cost of the disastrous plots of fascists and Nazis, fat cats and fogs. It's 1,000 natural shocks. A Bad with Money podcast.
Hello, and welcome to 1,000 Natural Shocks, a Bad with Money podcast. I'm your host, Gabe Dunn. And with me today, we have Jesse. Do you want to say where you're from and what you do and explain it in your own words for my audience?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Jesse. I am an organizer with Theater Workers for Ceasefire based in New York. We've been organizing for the past couple years as a solidarity formation with the Palestinian Liberation Movement. And yeah, we've been organizing theater workers around the support of the movement.
So was this connected to a union of any sort? How did you guys get connected to the broader Palestinian movement?
I can talk a little bit how we formed. There was an inciting action. There was a performer who was in a production of The Chinese Lady, which is a play by Lloyd Saw. If you don't know The Chinese Lady, in the last moment of the play, the character of Afang Moy eventually is in the actor's street clothes to just sort of reflect the mirroring of history between then and now. And after conferring with their director, the performer in this production wore keffiyeh and the words Free Palestine on their chest, and they were fired for doing this. So from then there was sort of a question of what we as theater workers were going to do. There had been a call from the Palestinian movement at large to form solidarity coalitions, which follow and reflect the priorities of the Palestinian movement, both BDS, or in our case PACB, which is the Palestinian Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel. So it formed kind of from that as a solidarity coalition in response to the Palestinian call for allies and sympathizers to actually create organizations to engage in the struggle, which is, I specify organized coalitions. And then we really wanted to have an organizational structure in place that allowed us to stay most on mission and to allow us to best serve the needs of the movement.
What was the reason given for firing someone for wearing the street clothes they would wear?
I actually don't remember the exact reason given, but, I don't think it's...
No, I know why. I know why.
Yeah, well, yeah, we know why.
But I'm wondering if they made something up as the reason.
If they did, it wasn't very transparent, but
Sure.
I can't speak that particular excuse they were given.
Interesting.
Certainly a catalyst for a lot of the founding organizers. So it's been from that one action. We've formed a series of campaigns and coalitions that I think have allowed us to more directly and more materially support the movement. Yeah, I think we're really proud of that because we are a materialist organization. We operate from the basis of material wins and material gains for the movement. Mobilizing and cultural interventions are important, and we fully acknowledge that, and direct action is important. We've certainly not shied away from that. But I think we're trying to solidify gains and wins that are sustainable and allow us to actually sustain the struggle over the long term, which is harder to do for less material-based actions. So I think that's something that we're very interested in from the outset.
What kind of things does that include?
So we have several campaigns. Our biggest one is the PACB Working Group. Again, the PACB is the Palestinian Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel. It is the sort of cultural and academic offshoot of the BDS movement. It calls calls for complete divestment from complicit and Israeli state-sponsored organizations and entities for cultural institutions at large. And this is a very material thing. PACB it's not about identity. It's not about not working with people who are Israeli, or for example, like Bat Shiva, the dance group, is directly sponsored by the Israeli state. The Israeli state has a function of their government called Hasbara, which is propaganda wing of
PR.
this. Yeah, it's very much PR. It's very much a state-sponsored thing. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is something that Israel has been very open about. So something like that constitutes a level of complicity. And there are varying levels of complicity in PACB, but we stick pretty close to the guidelines as laid out by the official BDS movement. So we meet bi-weekly, the PACB working group. You can actually, we just started meeting monthly, actually. So we meet monthly, and the primary objective towards that is getting United States theater organizations to take up the call for PACB. As of now, I believe we're well over 30 organizations and counting have endorsed PACB because of a lot of that work. There's certainly more to do. We organize around apartheid-free zones as well, a level of PACB compliance and a level of sort of becoming a space that is directly supportive of the Palestinian liberation movement and against apartheid, wherever that might be. We table, we've made a zine. It's a very comprehensive campaign. We have also the red carpet takeover campaign, which I don't know if you've seen. There's been opening nights of certain like Broadway shows, musicals, plays, award ceremonies like the Tony Awards, where you'll see people that have little pins that say Theater Workers for Ceasefire. This is part of our red carpet takeover campaign. So to folks who are in the theater attending a high visibility event, we use these pins and we help people with talking points to sort of keep Palestine in the conversation at all levels of theater. We formed contingents with a lot of direct actions throughout the course of our existence as an org. So we'll partner with other organizations to sort of like form arts or theater coalitions at like rallies and protests and such. We periodically will host teach-ins, and this is sort of to develop both like our co-organizers, ourselves, and our audience's like core understanding of the conditions that we're organizing in, about imperialism, about settler colonialism in Palestine and beyond. We just hosted an event called Solidarity Fest at Jack in Brooklyn, which was a all-day, almost 12-hour series of programming that focused around both practical things like know your rights training, and actually we have a panel online that you could read from that with Rashid Khalidi and Robin D.G. Kelly, an organizer from a Palestinian youth movement, about the conditions in which culture workers are organizing. We had play readings. It was a very, very full day to sort of like both ground us culturally and materially in the conversation around Palestine. So that's a very broad, long and broad overview of what we do.
It's interesting that you mentioned, so BDS is boycott, divestment, sanctions. You also mentioned that it's not directed at individual Israelis, but rather institutions that are benefiting from. That is sort of the type of boycott that has gone on forever and ever through different groups as a tangible economic way to express displeasure in something a country is doing. I grew up very Zionist. I still have people that I follow, friends from home and stuff, that say things. And I also have a burner where I follow Zionist accounts. And the push is very much to make it seem as if this is to push Jews out of public life and to push Israelis out of public life. And I think what you said is really important for people to understand, is that it is systemic and that it is about who has power. And I'll give an example. It's interesting because, you know, we talk about Hasbara, but like every country has this in some way. And
we got Marvel
propaganda shows that are fully backed by LAPD. And
I know exactly which one you're thinking about.
Yeah. So in some ways, there is this idea from Zionists that Israel is being singled out, but everything is singled out. Every single country and every single group has systemic issues. And it is interesting that the pushback would be, okay, so we're bad, but everyone's bad. Okay. And I think there also has been this argument that I find bizarre well, you didn't care about this before, so it's trendy. And I want to push back on that and on opposition to ICE violence. You've never learned about something and decided you didn't like it, and then decided I would like to take action against a thing I have just learned that I don't like? Seems fairly obvious.
I speak as a Jewish person myself. I speak as like a Jewish theater worker. If you watch the film Israelism, you can sort of see this as well. But like, I think especially Jews in America who grow up hearing about Israel, we all come to reckon with it at some point in some way or another. I certainly came to it in my own time. On my end, it was well before October 7th. But that's, even other Jewish Americans who are, learning about this just now, because it's so hard to find this information because you have to seek it out, not because of any broad conspiracy, but because a lot of the way we're taught about Israel is rooted in the ideology of Zionism. And there's so many reasons for that. They're not evil reasons, but they are,
It's fear.
It's fear, and it's rooted in like the way our grandparents' trauma has been exploited. I had family in the Holocaust, and that fear is exploited. This is part of why I think it's often overlooked purposefully to smear BDS, but BDS has always held firm the phrase complicity, not identity. And we're talking about complicity in very, very specific ways that have to do with material and state connections to like the state of Israel. There are Israeli writers out there who've been produced at theaters, and they're not complicit. They are not like, right. And so they are not by BDS standards boycott them, This is not something that you hear very often because the opponents of BDS are, operating from either talking points that don't have the full story, or they have an ideological opposition to BDS. And I think part of, certainly I feel as my role as a Jewish American, is to clarify a lot of what the narrative has been around Israel and around its use of propaganda as a tool for the political project of Zionism, because that's what it is at the end of the day. And this is why it's so important to center Palestine in that conversation, because it's like, as soon as you make it about this existential question about Judaism, you completely take it out of its own political context, when fundamentally Zionism is a political ideology. It has nothing to do with Judaism. It is not an ideology that has any sort of Talmudic credibility. It kind of falls apart under the scrutiny of any Jewish ideology or text, or faith. Yeah. It is not something that we as Jews fundamentally need as part of our faith and our culture and our history.
That's what's so bizarre to me. If you were for this, and then now you see all of these people being murdered, what is well, they deserve it. They brought it on themselves. Okay. That still doesn't mean bomb everything, like, or they'd kill you. Okay, but they aren't. So
there's a fundamental Islamophobia that exists in that. And it's like, well, what happens if you free Palestine? I think there is, the assumption that a free Palestine would mean the mass slaughter of Jewish people. I think that is right. That's not grounded in any reality that we live in. This is not something
Seems
that
like a free Israel is resulting in a lot of slaughter of Palestinians. So
this is something we try and keep focused in the conversation. Is as soon as like you take away the political context of it, you forget that Zionism and the state of Israel it's a system. It is a system of apartheid. It is a system of settler colonialism. This is political conditions under which Palestinians live is just fundamentally untenable with the idea of democracy. It is untenable with the idea of any sort of equity. There are people who point to queer people and ethnic minorities, but these aren't, first of all, the state of Israel is not as open to queer people and ethnic minorities as it would have you believe.
Yes.
But second of all, there's nothing to be gained from trying to pit people against one another. We've always sort of believed as a solidarity formation that our struggles are connected. These are all the same struggle, the struggle against imperialism and settler colonialism and apartheid. It is something that is to the benefit of everybody. This is something that connects all of us by virtue of the way the system of capitalism works, by the virtue of the way imperialism works, and all the oppression that comes from that, including anti-Semitism. It all is baked into that system.
Yeah, that's what's freaking me out so much, is how much I feel that anti-Semitism has been used against us as a tool to make us do what the ruling class wants us to do to the detriment of our own people and our own selves. It's completely freaking me out. It's created a lot of death of empathy and compassion in a people that was fundamentally founded on that component of life. So it really has freaked me out a whole lot. And I think it's interesting, artists for a ceasefire, and especially with theater. Can you talk a little bit about what those have to do with each other for someone who might say that doesn't make any sense?
Fundamentally, culture shapes the way we view the world.
Yes.
Culture shapes the way we view humanity and politics. And as cultural workers, as theater workers, as people who exist in an art form that is, some people call it empathy machines. There's all different contexts in which you can make theater, both in the American context or if you want to do it in the Palestinian context. Politics is inherently baked in the way culture works and the way culture is received and made. We exist in a system, in a country where art has been sort of commodified, where art exists in a sort of context of market compulsions. But I think for us as theater workers, I think what we really want to advocate for is it's a people's art and it's a people culture. It's a people's culture, which is capable of reflecting the times as they are and capable of reflecting the contradictions inherent in our society and in our system. This is a sort of collectivist way to view art and theater, which is inherently collective art form. And therefore we want to both have a cultural industry, like the way the industry works, and a culture that is reflective of the collective struggle and of the need for collective justice.
Anyone can do anything. This is the big issue I have, especially with people saying that they feel silenced. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. I need the right person with the right background who can move our business forward. If I wanted candidates who match what I'm looking for, I'd trust Indeed-sponsored jobs. I actually found my job on Indeed, and it was so easy to search through what I wanted to do and my skills and find the right place that was looking for exactly what I could offer. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post even seen on other sites. Give your job the best chance to be seen with Indeed-sponsored jobs. They help you stand out and hire quality candidates who can drive the results you need. Sponsored jobs boost your posts for quality candidates so you can reach the exact people you want faster. And it makes a big difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs because you reach a bigger pool of quality candidates. Join the 1.6 million companies that sponsor their jobs with Indeed. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. Now with Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/badwithmoney. Just go to Indeed.com/badwithmoney right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/badwithmoney. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. You can make whatever play you want to make. And not to say capitalism, and you talked about the marketplace, you can make any kind of play you want to make, and people get to decide if they want to go or not go, and people get to decide if they want to tell people to go or not go. It's no different than saying, I don't want to see a play because X, Y, and Z, or I don't want to, support this person because of X, Y, and Z. I don't think there's anyone that was going to go see Batsheva that was stopped from going to see them by a boycott. But
it's like people could buy tickets, but there's a question of, that's why it is such it's a question of complicity. It's a question of, it is a question of where do we focus our mobilizing energy? Yeah. And I think that's part of the goal of PACB is to creating a cultural industry that is not actively and materially complicit in the production of state propaganda. There's a difference between programming a play by an Israeli person, which is that's not inherently a problem. Yeah. But I think part of the material conditions that we as a coalition are fighting for is a sort of meaningful material divestment from the active complicity in the apartheid state, in genocide, in the way Zionism functions as a political system and an economic system. I understand the frustration people have with the way theater is produced. We do exist in a very politically repressive time, especially now. You have Columbia University calling ICE on its own students and faculty for challenging Zionism. Right. This is a really precarious time. It's a numbers question. There is safety in numbers. There is safety in organizing our workplace. places there is
Right.
safety in materially organizing for Palestine. This is the way that capitalism works. They can't do anything
Right.
without workers. That's why we have theater workers for a ceasefire.
Right.
Theater cannot be made. Nothing can be made without the workers.
Right.
Workers have the power to collectively organize for change.
Yeah.
And the strength in our numbers and in our collective action and in organized struggle protects us from any meaningful retaliation. They can't do that against everybody. They can't fire everybody.
Right.
As someone who's worked in theater admin before, knows a lot of theater admin people, there's a lot more sympathy and readiness to engage in the struggle within these institutions than one might think. Part of why we organize, part of why we are collectively organizing is to build that mass struggle, to build that base so that we can both advocate for Palestinian liberation and protect one another. I want to be able to organize in a condition where people don't feel like they're going to lose their livelihoods. And that only happens in numbers and with organization.
Is there internal a conversation about different thoughts behind the Free Palestine movement? I think sometimes in leftist spaces, there's, well, this is what I mean by direct action. Oh, well, this is what I mean by direct action. Or I think there's this ability to brush the pro-Palestine movement off, which is so obnoxious, to say, oh, well, they want all of Israel destroyed and everyone killed. And it's like, you're not engaging with the nuance of what each group or each person in the group might think is the best solution or might want, and the ways in which that can come together into one movement and one purpose.
There is unity behind our goals, which is free Palestine from the river to the sea, as is said. There's a lot of politics like within what that looks like, but that's not our job to envision that. Our job is not to envision for the Palestinian people what a free Palestine looks like. That's why we are a solidarity formation. We are here to support the work of the Palestinian movement at large. We are not here to create new ideas about that, because like there's been a Palestinian liberation movement since the Nakba across all these spaces, across like including across Jewish spaces. There's been Jewish opposition to Zionism since the 1800s. There is unity within Theater Workers for a Ceasefire about not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We are not trying to like create new politics around it. We are following in solidarity with Palestinian movements that already, and that's part of why we have the BDS guidelines and why we have the PACB guidelines, because they're very specific in what we were talking about, and we are very specific with our material goals. Outside of the organizational structure, I think there is a belief that it's like the Palestinian movement just wants to get rid of all Jews, and that's just fundamentally not. You won't find that in the Palestinian creation movement. That's not part of the politics of it, just as it wasn't part of the politics with the movement against apartheid in South Africa.
Right.
The same talking points were used against Black South Africans. Like, well, what happens if you give Black South Africans equal rights in that state? It is a question that is fundamentally not founded in a good faith point of view.
Right. And I appreciate you saying that. That's one thing that I've bumped up against when I talk about abolishing prisons or abolishing ICE, or which is not even that old, or whatever it is.
2003, yeah.
Where people will say, well, okay, you free Palestine, then what? I'm like, you don't think that there has been decades of research on this? You think that you're the first person to ever think, but golly, what will they do once Palestine is free? My dude, there are people whose whole lives are dedicated to that question. There's resources, there's books, there's PhDs. If you have that question, figure it out. Read something.
Any kind of like qualification against Palestinian liberation, I ask, is apartheid right or wrong? Is genocide right or wrong? These are fundamental questions that are at the heart of this issue that I think cannot be qualified. These are inalienable rights, not determined by your ethnicity or your nationality. And that just fundamentally is at odds with the political goals of Zionism. This is not something that can exist in the way that, Zoran Mamdani was asked about this repeatedly. Do you believe Israel has the right to exist? A state that exists on that land must have equal rights for all. It cannot be an ethno-nationalist state. And fundamentally, it is an ethno-nationalist project that's just untenable with any values of democracy, any values of liberty or equality. This is not something that can be debated. So when people ask, well, what happens? What happens is you don't have an apartheid state.
Yeah.
What happens is that you don't have an ethno-nationalist state. What happens is that you don't have a state where genocide is permissible. These are conditions that are just untenable with any kind of sustainable society. There is no qualification for ending genocide. There's no qualification for ending apartheid.
Why don't you read every single thing you can read about what would happen or this movement or what Jewish scholars have said on it, anything, read all that, and then come back to me and be like, I don't know about this, because I grew up in Zionism. There's this dismissive thing about genos, which is like Jews in name only. I do not qualify for that. They'll say it's easy for you to be anti-Zionist because X, Y, and Z. And no, it's not. I've been there multiple times. I am familiar with the country and the people and all of it. And so that's why it took me a long time to come to this place. But also, if you're like, well, how is it going to work? Look it up.
It's also important to remember that Jews lived in Palestine long before there was the state of Israel.
Right. So there you go.
You know, and meaningfully, there are Jews of all denominations that are anti-Zionist.
Right.
There is no level of Jewishness that you have to be to have a stance on apartheid. There is no level of Jewishness that would disqualify
Right.
the belief, the upholding of said belief that genocide is inexcusable, that genocide
right.
is wrong, and that it should be stopped. There is, and fundamentally, as Jewish people, given our history
Right.
of being persecuted, it is untenable with Judaism to support genocide and
Yeah.
apartheid. Our Jewish ancestors lived under those conditions.
Mhm.
They lived in ghettos. There's a ghetto in like every major European city you go to.
Right.
Our people have lived under apartheid. There is no excuse
Right.
for creating a system like that for other people. There's a question that always comes up of like, well, don't you think Jews deserve to be saved? Of course. Everybody
They're
has the right
bad
to
faith
safety.
questions.
Nobody
Bad faith
has the right.
questions.
They're bad faith questions. Nobody has the right to an ethno state. This is a fundamental belief of mine. Is like that their ethno nationalism should not exist. There should not be ethno nationalism, and you cannot advocate for it alongside democracy.
Then they go, oh, well, what about this? What about that? Yeah, I don't like that either. What about the U.S.? Yeah, I don't like that either. There's a big one that the fight, this is unrelated somewhat, but argument I got in on Reddit about Epstein. And they were like, why didn't Biden's DOJ go against Epstein? And I'm like, oh, you're mistaken. I don't like any of it. I think people of all political backgrounds are in the files. There's no incentive for Biden to have gone after. This isn't Trump versus Biden. They're all bad. And then someone was like, well, I can actually respect that opinion. And I was like, dude, I think that they're all evil. And then the person was like, oh, okay. Imperialism bad. Full stop.
I mean, I think people try and undermine the conversation around Palestine by naming the United States as also a settler colonial entity. And it's like, yes, correct. It is also a settler colonial entity. We talk about the Biden administration. It's like the Biden administration is wholeheartedly and proudly complicit in the genocide that started after October 7th. Every level of complicity in the Democratic Party as well as in the Republican Party. People can talk about like what's better or what's worse. There's no better or worse genocide. There's only genocide.
Well, what about the one in Sudan? Yeah, I don't like that either.
Any argument that tries to downplay or to qualify the idea that genocide is wrong is fundamentally not in good faith, because whatever level, whatever the quote unquote numbers are, genocide is
I know
a crime against humanity. You know,
I know.
There's just these you know, these are talking points that come up very often. I think what's really heartening is that more and more people of all faiths, of all backgrounds, of all, frankly, surprisingly, many political leanings in the US are starting to see through as bad faith. Part of why you see such an upswell in support for Palestinian liberation in levels in the United States and in the imperial core that are kind of unprecedented. And you're starting to see meaningful action too. You're starting to see meaningful movement towards divestment. You're seeing corporations like Microsoft who are being forced to rethink their contracts with the state of Israel. And this is a really, really good development. This is a very, very positive development. I also want to remind everybody that this is happening under the taxes that you're about to pay this month.
Yup.
A giant portion of our tax dollars, billions of dollars per year. I believe it increased to 8 billion under Joe Biden, and it's certainly going to be more under Donald Trump. That is billions and billions of dollars that could be going to Medicare for all, that could be going to universal housing, to universal child care, that is going towards bombing children.
Right. I know. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Where can
Yeah,
people
on that
find
note,
more?
thanks.
I know, exactly. Listen, this show is kind of like that.
I also just want to say there is like these conditions under which
Yeah.
we live, they are scary. We are still living under conditions where Palestinians are still being murdered every day
Right.
by the IOF in Gaza. There is massive upswell in settler violence as Israel tries to illegally annex the West Bank.
Mm-hmm.
But I want people to understand that with collective struggle, with collective organization, there is hope. Over decades and decades and decades, since 1948, time and time again, you see the Palestinian people. They have resisted occupation and apartheid and genocide with a fervor that has just been unflinching. Every day as entire bloodlines are wiped out, as villages are leveled, and historical monuments and food and culture are just completely destroyed. But they're still fighting, and they still haven't given up the idea, the hope, the knowledge that there will be a free Palestine. Who are we to give up hope? If they can still have that, if they can still fight with that fervor, then so can we. And so
Okay,
should we.
that's nice. That's nice.
Much better, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Do you want to point our listeners in the direction that you would like to point them in?
Yeah, I mean, you can follow us at theaterworkersforceasefire.com. We also find us on Instagram as well, at theaterworkersforceasefire. We have our PACB working group that meets every month that you can sign up for on our website. I want to point people towards the Palestinian Youth Movement and Jewish Voice for Peace, both of which are really, really meaningfully organizing for free Palestine. To our fellow American Jews, I know it can feel really isolating. It can be really uncomfortable to be in more conservative Jewish spaces where you feel like expressing your political opinions. But again, anti-Zionism has existed since before the state of Israel.
Yes.
And
They
it will
just don't
exist
tell
long
us
after.
about it.
They just don't tell us about it, but they exist.
Yeah.
Jewish Voice for Peace is out there. There are spaces where that exists. So seek them out. You can find them, and they're there for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to 1,000 Natural Shocks, a Bad with Money podcast. This is a noted bisexual production, edited by Ali Mims. Logo art by Dakota Becker. If you like the show, please consider subscribing to the Substack, 1000naturalshocks.substack.com. The Substack has episodes of this show ad-free and also videos and also my original writing. It would mean so much to me if you would subscribe, even as a free subscriber. But a paid subscriber really allows me to keep doing this work, and I can't do it without you guys. Thank you so much. Okay, love you. Bye.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Ali Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.